guys, welcome back to this tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to be discussing about lambda expressions, map, filter, reduce, and how to combine them in different combinations. So first we have to learn something known as lambda expressions. Lambda expressions are very similar to functions. You can think of them like basically one-line functions instead of having the def and then the function name and so on. The language you're going to be using today is Python, so let's begin. So we'll begin with the lambda expressions. Lambda expressions have a very simple syntax. So we'll say syntax. Let me just write down for you the syntax we're going to be using. Syntax is, you're going to write the keyword lambda, and then text in a parameter, a colon, and then an expression. So that's the basic syntax of a lambda expressions. So let's compare lambda expressions with functions so that you can understand what they do. So let's begin with the functions. Let's call this function increment. This function is basically going to take in a variable x, and it's going to increment. It's going to return to us the increment value. It's going to increment it by 2. So we're going to say return, going to take x, and then we're going to add 2 to it. So that is the function basically. So let's see a lambda version of this function. So let me call it lambda and give it a variable. I'm going to store the lambda expression in a variable. So we're going to say lambda expression should be equal to our lambda function. So say lambda, and then you're going to take in x, then we're going to return x plus 2. So that is all. So these two functions, the increment functions and this lambda function, basically do the same. They both take in a variable parameter x and return an increment of that value by 2. So let's print out the result of both. So we're going to print, and call the increment, and then we're going to pass in 2. Now let's see what the lambda function is going to return to us. So we're going to take it, we're going to write the function my lambda, you're going to give it 5. So this one, what the result we're going to expect is that it's going to return to us 2, because it's going to take 2 plus 2, which makes it 4, and this lambda expression takes in 5, and 5 plus 2, which makes it 7. Sorry. So let me just run it to see what we get. So here we get 4 for the first increment function, which is returned by the first increment function because it takes in a 2, and 7, which is returned by the lambda expression. So that is how basically lambdas work. So they're just functions, but one line they are written in one line shortly. So let's see how we can implement lambda expressions in our main topic of today, which is how to use map, filter, and reduce. So let's begin with the map function. It has a very simple syntax, and what it does, we say the map parenthesis. Inside here it takes a callback function, and then an iterable. So that's what it does. It takes a callback function and an iterable. Note that there can be more than one iterable at this point. There can be more than one iterable. There can be 1, there can be 2, or any amount that you want. So let's see how it works. So what does the map function do? What it basically does is that it takes an iterable, it loops through each element of the iterable, and then performs whatever expression that we have written in the function for each of these variables, elements from the iterable. So for example, let's imagine that you have a list. Let's call it here my list, which will be just a simple list containing some numbers, okay, and 9, 1 through 9. So let's say that we want to increment each element within this list by 2, by a value of 2. Now we could use a for loop to do this. We loop to each element and we add 2 to it, but map makes it simpler for us. So you can say can say data, which will be equals to the map keyword, and then equals a function. You can see I need to provide a function, the callback, and an iterable. So first let's ignore the function part, and then let's provide the iterable, which will be my list. So now here at the callback, let me just write here callback. We can either use a lambda expression as we have discussed earlier over here, or we can use a normal function. So first let's use the functions that you already defined here. So first we'll use the increment, which takes the number, a value, and then increments it by 2. So we can just copy this and paste it in place of our sorry, let me just type it out. Increment. So you have provided the function here, the callback function, and the list, which the iterable. So for each element within this list, this function will be called, and that element will be passed into that function. So on the first iteration, one will be passed into increment. So 1 will be incremented by 2, which will get 3. This will be done for every other element. Now this, if we try to print it out, this will return to us an object identifier, not the actual value which we want. So if you try to run this, you are going to get an object identifier, which is here. These two result as the result of the previous function. So let me just comment it out. So now let me run it again so that you can see. So on the second one, we can see we only get an object identifier. So now to get the actual object, the actual data which you want, like a list, we need to convert this object into a list. So you can just say list like that. So if you run this time around, you're supposed to get a list of all the elements incremented by 2. So you can see over here, the 1 was incremented by 2, which is now 3. The 2 was incremented by 2, which is now 4. The 3, 5, and so on and so forth. So that's how a function, a map works. So it takes element and applies to it the expression within a certain function to each of the elements. So now we have used here a normal function. Let's try to use a lambda instead. So we could just delete this. Sorry, you can just say lambda. We're going to take in any value you want, and then you're going to write in our expression. We're going to take that value and you're going to add to it 2. So this should also work just like the way the previous normal function works. So if you run this, we get the same results. So that's how we can use normal functions and lambda expressions and in working with maps. Okay, so let's move on to filter. What filter does? Filter is basically has the same syntax as a map, but what it does, the difference is in what they do. Map does what is within a function to each of the elements within the iterable, while a filter returns only certain elements of the iterable that have been returned true to by a given function. So let me show you how it does. So I see the syntax is similar to map, so I'll just copy this over here and paste it here. So but the only difference is this will be filter. So it has the filter keyword, a callback function, and then an iterable. It can be one or many iterables. So you can just say data, you can say filter, and then you're going to call it callback function. So let's call it callback. Sorry, callback. I can't spell back. Okay, callback function, and then you're going to provide in an iterable. So let me just copy this list over here and turn it over here, so that we can get to see how it works on the same scenario but with different functions. So here we have the list, my list, which is a list element and has 1 through 9. Let's say that, so we are going to pass in this list. Sorry, we're going to pass this list in here. So we have our iterables. Now we need to think about on which basis we want to filter the element, which kind of elements do you want to return, and which expressions must they return true to. So let's say we want to return only numbers that are even numbers. Okay, so from now on I'll be using lambda expressions because they are more easier to use compared to defining whole-fledged functions. So a number divisible by 2, if its modulus returns 0. So we return this. So this will take take each element, try to divide it by 2, find its modulus by 2. If it returns 0, means that the number is even, because we all know all even numbers are divisible by 2 and have no remainders. So let's print out. First we need to convert into a list, and we're going to pass in data. So this is going to return to us all even numbers, or all numbers that are exactly divisible by 2. So if we run this, we get 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8, which are even numbers. So that's how filter works. Something that you have to know, that the callback function must return a Boolean value. It must return a Boolean value. The callback function of a filter statement must always return a Boolean value. I can't stress on this enough. If we didn't specify a Boolean value, expression that returns a Boolean value, this won't work. Filter always return a Boolean, must return a Boolean value. So thanks. So let's move on to reduce. So let me just comment these things out, and then I'll copy this. In fact, let me just copy all of this and I'll paste it here. So the syntax of oh, we have jumped one, sorry. So here we're supposed to do reduce. Now reduce is like has the same syntax as filter, map, and reduced. So it have here a keyword which will be reduce. Reduce takes in a callback function and an iterable or iterables. Depend, can be one list or many lists. It has the same thing as filter, map, and reduce. But in reduce function, the only difference between reduce between filter, map, and reduce is that reduce, it returns a summary. It's sort of like a summary, summarizes all the data. So for example, let's say we want a sum of all of these numbers. Now instead of using a for loop, which will take us a lot of time, we can simply use a reduce, which will return to us a sum of all the numbers. So just say data, which will be reduce. So I forgot one thing. Reduce must be imported from a library called functools. So we need to import it. So I'll just do the import in this section. I know it's not a good idea. It's always best to put your imports at the beginning. So we say from functools. From functools import is called reduce. So we're going to bring that reduce. We're going to put that reduce in here, and you can see it takes a callback function and a sequence. The sequence is also an iterable. So let's dump a lambda expression which will bring it two values, x, y, and you're going to add up these two values, going to x plus y, and then you're going to pass in my list, which will be our iterable my list. So this is going to do, it's going to take two elements at a time, and it's going to add them up, and at the end of the time it's going to return to us a sum of all the elements. So let's print it out. This is going to return to us a sum, so we don't need to convert into a list. So we just print out data, means the result which will be returned will be stored in data. So let's print this out. It has returned to us 45, and truly we can also add this up. 1, 3, 1 plus 2, 3, 3 plus 3, 6, 10, 15, and so on. If you add these guys up, you get 45. Okay, let's prove it. Let's reduce this so that we can save time. Okay, so 1 plus 2, which is 3, 3 plus 3, which is 6, 6 plus 4, which is 10. So on this time around, we're supposed to get a result of 10, which is here. Yeah, so everything is working. That's what a reduce function does. So now let's move on to more advanced. Let's use move on to how we can combine, or how we can use filter inside of a map function. So for example, let's say that you have a list and then you want to add 2 to all the even numbers within that list. So first of all, we need to get the even numbers and then we add 2 to all of them. So what we can do, let's just copy this list which you have over here. Let's paste it here. So you're going to just use, I know I'm using this word data so much, but just bear with me. So we're going to map, because we want filter instead of map. So what we want to do is that we want to first get all the even numbers. We want a list of all the even numbers, and then we take that list, we add 2 to all of them. So first of all, let's leave the logic of adding to them. First, let's find the even number. So we say filter, and then we want to find the even number. So we already did that earlier. So it's a lambda. We'll take in an x, a variable, and then what we'll do is we'll check if that variable is divisible by 2, and then we need to pass in a list, which in this case is my list. Just going this guy out. In this case is my list. So what is going to do, this filter is going to go to each element. Even for mistake over here, you can go to each element within my list, and it's going to find the ones which are divisible by 2, which are even numbers, and then it's going to return all of them. And we can notice that this stands in the place of iterable when we come to the map method. So it's going to return a list of all the even numbers, and then we want to do something to this list. So we can say lambda, we want to add 2 to all of these even numbers. So take this, and then we add, let's add 4, let's say 2 to all those even numbers. Okay, so what is going to do, filter return to us all the even numbers within the list, and then we're going to use map to add 2 to each of them. This return to us an object, so we need to change this object into a list when printing it out. Okay, like that. So let's run this. So perfect, we get all even numbers which have been incremented by 2, because let's just make a list of the even numbers here from this list up here. So we can say the even numbers will be 2, 4, 6 and 8. 2, 4, 6 and 8. That is returned by this filter method. Return to us 2, 4, 6 and 8, because they are the only even numbers within this list. And then that list will be passed on to the map method, which increments each by 2. So 2 plus 2 we get 4, 4 plus 2 gets 6, 6 plus 2 we get 8, and 8 plus 2 we got 10. So that's how we can use filter inside of map. Okay, I hope you get the concept. So let's move on. Now we are moving on to let's copy this along. Let's save time. So we're going to move on to our next part, which will be using map inside of filter. Now this is just the opposite of what we did. So let's imagine that we have this list. We want to add 3 to all the elements. So we're going to use map to affect each element within the list, because map affect each element within the list. Then you're going to use filter to return to us the ones which are divisible by 2, or which are even numbers, after adding 3 to all of them. So we can just say that we can say filter because you're going to use map instead of filter. So now let's leave the logic of filtering first. Let's use the map to first get the numbers, to first increment each element by 2. Okay, no, let's do it by 3. Let's increment by 3 because we've been doing 2 all the time. And you're going to pass in here my list. Okay, so you're going to use this lambda expression which increments each element within my list by 2. Let's do 3 by 3, and then it will return to us a list. Now we're going to pass that list into the filter method. Now on which conditions do you want to filter? Going to take in, let's take in y, and then on which condition do you want to factor? You want to factor out the numbers which are exactly divisible by 2. So you're going to take the and then you're going to divisible by 2. Yes, there. So you're going to use the map to increment each element by 2, and use filter to return the ones which are even. This is going to return to us an object, so obviously you have to remember to turn into a list whenever we are printing it out. So there we go. So I can just run this perfectly. So this has incremented each number by 3, and it has returned to us the even ones. So this 1 incremented by 3 to get 4, and 4 is an even, we get an even back. This 2 plus 3 to be 5, 5 is not even. 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 is an even, we get 6. 4 plus 3, 7. 8, we get 8. And then this 10, we get 10. And then 9 plus 3, which is 12, we get this. So it has returned to us, it has incremented all the numbers in the list by 3, and then has returned to us those which have turned out to be even or divisible by 2. So yeah, so now let's go to the last part of our tutorial, where we'll be learning how to use map and filter inside of radius. So let's think of a scenario where we want to filter a number, filter out maybe numbers that are divisible by 3, and then we add 2 to them, and then return their sum. Okay, like that. So we just go. So at the last thing we want to do is reduce. So let's uncomment the import statement. Okay, let's just import it again. I don't know if I've commented it out. So let's import again. So let's just do this in memory. Let's strengthen our memory from functools, import, oh my god, import radius, right? Radius. So we're going to bring radius over here. First of all, we want to filter out. First, let's not write the logic of how we're going to add it up. First, let's write the logic of getting first the even numbers out, and then we are going to add increment by 2, and we're going to return the sum. So let me just write for you. Let's do simple table here so that you can understand. So we're going to filter, and then you get the values. We're going to map it, and then finally we're going to reduce. So now, after taking this table, then we're going to write the code is in a reversed order, first starting with the reduce, the map, and then the filter. So now we need to use the map because you're going to increment even number. So first of all, we need to filter out the even number. So let's write the condition to get out the filter numbers. So be lambda taking x, and then you're going to check if x is divisible by exactly divisible by 2. I say 2. This must be a boolean statement. Okay, then I'm going to pass in my list. So this returns to us a list of all the even numbers. Now we want to increment them by 2, so we're going to say lambda. I'm going to take y, let's put in the value of y, and then plus 2. After adding 2 to them, we want to return a sum of all those numbers. So we're going to take lambda, we're going to take q comma r, and then you're going to return a sum of each, sum of q plus r. That's how we're going to work. So let's just go over this. We filtered out the numbers to get even numbers. We added 2 to each of the even numbers, and then we are going to return a sum of all those values. Okay, so now let's print it out. That this is going to return to us a value, because reduce or return an integer according to what you're doing. So it does not return like an object, it's an actual value. So let's print it out. You get 28. So I know this is complex to do, to filter and then add. So but basically if you filter, we get 2, 4, 6 and 8. So 2 plus 2, 4, 4 plus 2, 6. We get all of that, and then you're going to return the sum of it. So that's what the program usually does. You can take time, calculate this yourself just to cross check. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Please leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing really motivates me to keep making these videos, so subscription is highly needed. Thanks for watching.